Ago. 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 Memamo ajo. Ekurale. Fier. Yeshie. Agamgonzi. I greet you. Good evening. Okay, that's one full coverage area. All right, I'd like to thank all of you for coming. I'm sure we'll have even more coming in, but I think we already have a good sized crowd. As you know, today we'll be showing a film, a documentary on the life of Ota Benga. Ota Benga, let's say that name, Ota Benga. Ota Benga. And this is an African, as you will see, who was displayed in the Bronx Zoo. He had quite a tragic story, but we'll learn a lot about him. And then we'll also see how it relates to certain modern events that we still see going on to this very day. So with no further ado, we'll go ahead and start the documentary, and then we'll have a discussion. Following the discussion, we'll do a group photo, as we always do, as our tradition here in African Studies, for history for posterity. So again, thank you for coming, and enjoy. I'm not sure if enjoy is the right word, but the film is coming. Thank you. Ago. 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 So I've actually seen this before. The director came here a few weeks ago. We had African Studies Association of Africa, and he brought this copy to us here in African Studies as a donation so that we could show it to students and to the community here, because many of us don't know about this story. We may not have ever heard the name Ota Benga. What we're passing around is actually from National Geographic, and I only did 30 copies. We have many more than 30 people, I see, and I'm glad that you're hearing our numbers. But it relates directly to what we're dealing with, because it talks about how Europeans and Asians, what we refer to as Eurasians, that they have what's known as Neanderthal DNA. Has anyone ever heard of what a Neanderthal is? A Neanderthal is not quite human. When we talk about human, that we're referring to Homo sapiens sapiens. When you think of Neanderthal, this is what we usually think of when we think of cavemen, with clubs, walking around Europe, so forth and so on. So according to their own genetic research, that Europeans are actually not fully Homo sapiens sapiens, that they have a percentage of Neanderthal DNA, which is another hominin. So that's another type of hominin, but not quite Homo sapiens sapiens. So when they came out with this research a few years ago, now they started talking about how great it is that they have this caveman DNA, and how it improves their immune system, and they have all these traits and other things. Now imagine if the shoe would have been on the other foot, and they would have found genetic proof that Africans are mixed with some other type of ape or primate or something. So as Ota Benga was around the zoo, you saw that they were grunting at him, tripping him up, doing all these things. And what they were really showing, there's a book by Sheikh Anta Diop called Civilization or Barbarism. Now many of us are under the mistaken belief that African people were waiting for Eurasians, Europeans and Asians, to bring civilization to us. But if you look at the Congo, Leopold, who was mentioned, killed over 10 million Africans. That's the lowest estimate. Over 10 million Africans. If they didn't bring up their quota in rubber, they would have their hands cut off. The women would have their breasts cut off, and then the breasts would be sold as purses. I hope you're following along. All right, so all of this is documented. You can see pictures online that were taken at that time. And I remember one that is burned into my memory of a man looking at the remains of his daughter. All that was left was the hand and the foot. And the rest of her, they said that they took it away. And so this is him looking at his daughter, 3 or 4 years old. So I have a daughter. And picture what will be going through your head. And you're seeing the severed hand and foot, and that's all that's left of your child. So Ota Benga, his family was massacred. Then he was sold to a market for enslavement. This is in the 1900s. We're told that it was abolished in the 1800s. but they still have the markers for enslavement in the 1900s, where he was then sent to St. Louis for the World's Fair and then put into the zoo. And as it was talked about, still at sporting arenas in Europe, you have Sulle Montari in Italy, right, where they're chanting monkey, they're throwing bananas. And the ones who are throwing bananas are actually showing that they are mixed with primates. And they're doing it to the only pure Homo sapiens sapien on the face of the planet Earth, because everyone else is mixed with other types of hominins. So in psychology, they call that projection, right? So I want you all to, look at that information. You can get it in National Geographic, Smithsonian, all the documentation about who they are and who we are in relation to them. The only degree to which we have any Neanderthal DNA is the degree to which Europeans came here and raped our ancestors, or that there's been any reverse migration and admixture because of that. I hope you're following. So let's open up the floor. I just wanted to set the tone for that, but let's open up to the floor for any comments, questions, reactions about the film. It was very somber, but hopefully it's making you think about who you are and whose you are in the world. Any thoughts, comments, questions?
Hello, everybody. My name is Naya. I've been here for 11 months, and being from America, I was born here, but I've been in America for 49 years, and people never understand why we that were in America despise white people. And so when you look at things like that, nobody is talking right now. Everybody's like, just kind of like, ugh. But this is what we go through every single day. And in Africa, you might see 3 or 4 white people, and the majority, everyone is African. But in America, we're the minority, so we're only 13%, and we have to deal with that crap all the time. So just imagine 80% of the population coming at you with that type of mindset all the time. And that's the reason why we, in America, we can't, I left there because of that mindset. So I'm realizing that everybody is like really quiet, like you guys just can't process or fathom this stuff that was in this film. But that's life in America. That's how you deal with, that's how you have all of those people looking at you as if there's something wrong with you, when in fact they're the ones that are really the ones that are the animals.
Okay. Yeah. My name is Gideon Probe. I want to say that thank you, first of all, thank you for the film, and thank you for the good way you managed to publicize this program. So I think that's good. Now the first thing I want to say is, immediately we came into this room. Do you want me to start?
Okay.
When we came into this room and then you started showing us the film, I immediately remembered an article, I think a news item I have read on the BBC. Those of you who can find it, the title is "The Man Stuffed and Displayed Like a Wild Animal." The man stuffed, S-T-U-F-F, stuffed and displayed like a wild animal. Now, this is a very similar story to Ota Benga, and this man was a warrior from, I think, Botswana. This is 1821, not 1906 or 90. So you can see that it's something that has built on and on onto getting live humans to present. This man was dead and carried over to Spain, and I think in 1992 during the Barcelona Olympics, some people made noise about it. But interestingly, the Catalans said that they would not bring the remains of later they called him El Negro. They will not bring back the remains of El Negro to Botswana because they called it the national treasure of the Catalans. And it's sad, even later on, I think it was the year 2000, that it was finally brought to Botswana. Now, I want to say this, and I just in addition, now, that's the final thing I'm going to say, that we need to be careful, I think, and we should discuss it, we need to be careful of anti-racial racism. That's what I'm thinking. That here's the case, we want to come to a point where white people, black people see themselves as equally human. And so when I see or hear words that seem to suggest that now I am not only human, but I'm even more human than you, and that you are down, I think...
from whose squad, the blacks or the whites?
No, I mean from the blacks.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about anti-racial racism.
You should just tolerate that and watch them.
No, I'm not saying tolerate them and watch them. It's good we have to come into a
Be
discussion.
careful about that. Right?
Great, let's talk about it. But what I'm saying to you is, if you come up to say you are human, I'm black, okay, and somebody is racially abusing me, I tell the person I'm human. I'm as human as you are. But if I say to him, I'm more human even than you, then I am seeming to do what he initially was doing. Let's talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Tracy. I want to throw a question to the lady who first spoke about what you guys have been going through in America every single day as blacks. My first question is that I know that Martin Luther King was one of the people who was trying to fight all these against the white people. He was the leader of all these, but unfortunately he passed on. Has anybody tried?
He was murdered, assassinated.
Yes.
By
Yes,
the same white
he was murdered.
Yes.
But after then, has anyone tried to get up so that all of you follow to help that person fight all that? Number one. And number two, I like the bold step you took by coming down, because you stayed there for 49 years, you've seen all this nonsense and you are not ready to take it. So you just decided to take the bold step of coming down to where you are from. So how many people there, I mean from Zimbabwe, Nigeria, and all the other African countries who are there, have decided to take that bold step? And why are they still there? What are they doing there? I don't know what they are doing there. I just want to know what they are doing there. Like, apart from education, I think that would be one of the 9 reasons to go there, because of education. But like, what are they doing there? Are they still sweeping the streets or what? I don't know what they are doing there.
He has a mic.
Oh no, Charlie, it's not working. Yeah, my name is Eddie Kamkuchenyo, and last week I was here to watch Ancestral Voices. It was about like African spiritual system, us trying to understand it and the link with nature. And then one guy got up there, I'm a Christian and I'm against you and all of that crap. Fine, we're in the academia, so you can tolerate everybody's bullshit view. I'm sorry for that. But like, we've watched this, you desecrate my religion and my spirituality, not even religion. For over 400 years, I'm supposed to tolerate you for that. Now they're trying to show you everything that you're inferior. Yeah, exactly, so it's in academia, so I'm very bad at this. Because I'm supposed to tolerate some views, even if every other odds are against you, get me? But let me just say this, so, I think, over a couple of weeks, Bob McNair, the owner of the Houston, Texas NFL team, said that we can't have the inmates running the prison. Simply because Colin Kaepernick just knelt down trying to... You get me? So, what are you doing about it? You want to just understand them. What are you doing about it? Do you not see sense in it? No, boss. You know that makes sense? No, so me I suck at this academia thing because the truth now, I mean, we can't tolerate it anymore. I can go on and on, but like I have to infringe on the so-called intellectuals. Last time at the African Studies Week celebration, we had this Jesuit priest. I'm at the Vatican and all that crap. He's from Congo, and he can give you the list of like, okay, Pope Leo said this. It was about humanitarianism and how the missionaries go and educate the Africans. They are savages, and the worst things they do. You list all of these things, and he's still the priest. What the fuck are you still doing with the Catholic Church? Don't you want to help your people? Like he's gone beyond that. Ota Benga, when he was alone, listen, he tried to throw a chair at the damn lady. He even used the knife to try attacking some damn inmate. Hello, what are you doing? What have I done? I can show you videos right now. Let me tell you, I'll show you right now. I'm just coming from Pent, and then I was talking to the guys about this plant breeders bill. They found maize and some cassava over there. I was trying to, I can show you videos right now. They don't even understand it, so I was trying to tell them what's going on. And I showed them around Melchior's videos about how religion sucks. I'll be aware, but I'm not good with a tree. So he speaks to you and they try to get it. That's what I'm doing. I can show the pure Roberts in my bag right now. I don't throw them away.
It's okay.
No, it goes beyond that, so we just sit there.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. I think we have heated discussions. But when I was watching this documentary, I paid attention to the subjects or the content of the documentary, and I realized that even a stillborn child is having more dignity than Ota Benga, because if you as a human being, they put you in a cage and they advertise and people come to just watch you and compare you to the wildlife. Look at that type of life. Just put yourself in that. In real life example, one day one of our professors had his PhD in one of the European countries, and he said his first days at school, whenever they ask a question and he answers, the class they were amazed. How can you answer this, a black man? So he has some friends there who always come to, how were you able to answer this question? Because if you can't, how were you able to answer that? And I was happy when we saw an example of Ghana, where somewhere there was a t-shirt of some supporters with Ghana in that. You can look at that, look at what they did. They painted their face black. So I think there are a lot of things that we can do as Ghanaians, because they don't respect us. We should make them respect us.
It's not as Ghanaians, as Africans.
Yes. As Ghanaians, as Africans.
No, as Africans, because we are one.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to tell a Ghanaian.
I was able to actually see something and then recognize us. I remember a speech delivered by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah on this last African freedom fighters. The most pressing issue is that we Africans are failing to be one. And you can see that there are internal wranglings between ethnicity and then religion and who we are. The issue is that when we can't recognize ourselves as a united Africans and even a united Ghanaians, we can't champion this fight. We have a case where one tribe has become so superior and implicating its attitudes and culture against the other tribe. Because if we can't recognize the fact that we are all Africans and the fact that these people are our enemies, and at the end, we are not seeing them as an enemy, but they are seen as an alternative to their side. So at the end of the day, we must unite against these people. And also what we are failing to recognize is that the moment we change our names, we change our destiny and where we come from. We have issues where Ghanaians are being named after all sorts of names. And I can't understand a Ghanaian man naming himself other names and other European names. That's it. And the issue of Ota Benga is that I could have said that Ota Benga should have come back being bold. It wasn't necessary. Death is It's not the last option to do in your life. You could have championed this fight against the fight of racism and other stuff. You could have come back to his hometown, tell the people that this is what I went through.
How?
So, no, killing yourself wouldn't be the last option.
That's what you were told.
That's
When you watch this thing, that's what you were told, that you committed suicide.
So thank you for the opportunity. Patrick Mitchell. Very good. Who be say I'm showing here. Yes, I'm for near near Babani say, yes, Susania Pedino, Ekam, ye bube fu, near Wamudia, yes, so near Yabayan one should yana across scene. And I say, yes, you are ye diabo, my brother son, and I am my prima. Sebi kata Yesuana na ne yehuno entumi amwaye na ya pese ye no womo ayepe we wouldn't be any better than they are say ye hwe sinema yetumi hu say reacting up to what you are yetumi hu say who say Christophobia wo they mention pastors or ministers. They rather brought the injustices to the light. You understand? Not the politicians or the businessmen or whatever. It was the ministers, the religious leaders. It's Hosenia Yama Oson Yadani Osumeni Amana Papa said, Bibia Efa Chromosome Chrysosome Ana say Yanka Sampo Yebibimu Ememu Asuno and yet. It is the wrong side of religion, the way religion has been portrayed. Yes, I know that when the white man came here, they came trying to introduce the scriptures to us. But at the same time, and this is what we always say, the same time they came with a gun at the back. So they were handing over the Bible to us, and also they held the gun behind them. This is a normal thing we often say, which is not quite the case. We must delineate between the missionaries and the business or the politicians. They were different people, so they came along maybe from the same boat, yes. But the missionaries were here to evangelize. They did their work and they introduced education. Some of the first educations were led by missionaries. So let's see the positive aspects of religion and not bundle everything together as though the ministers were the ones who were doing the injustice of all this. I'm talking to you, I'm a Reverend Father David Ando.
Reverend Father?
Yes.
Thank you.
So the way you mentioned the
I'm a Catholic. I was baptized by Mama Bako. No. Let's address it.
Okay.
Let's address it.
Yeah, thank you, Father.
Oh, I was baptized.
Please, can we also have our then? Thank you. I'm Patrick, and listening to the conversation, I guess if we could have this, we could even have it the whole night, and we'll still not even get anywhere. But I want to situate what we just watched within our context now. What do we do different in the Ghanaian society? Don't we discriminate? Don't we see others as being more superior to others? I look at that in view of what Kandawidi wrote in Savages, Victims, and Saviors. If you have the opportunity to read his article, and probably add that of Mahmoud Mandani. If you add any of those articles on colonialism, and you look at it, you say, they argue the point that yes, they came with their culture, they came with their religion, they came with everything that separated the African from his root. Granted that, yes, that was done. But within ourselves, we are in a very subtle, not in a very subtle manner, but we are actually perpetrating that
We are entrenching that within our culture. I listened to one Nigerian who said, we'll go to Europe, we'll go to London, and we'll fight for equality. But when we come down to the African continent, what do? We look ourselves on tribal lines. And I say that, let me be a bit controversial now. Because when we listen to even the political language that we have in Ghana here, where others are thinking they are superior to others, and others must be given first right because they belong to a certain race, it is because we have accepted some of these things, and we are not making any conscious efforts to change them. Thank you.
Have you tried to make a conscious effort yourself? Have you tried?
If you want to see me, then engage me on.
All right. Hello. Please. We will try as much as possible and make the discussions as decorum as they can be.
As decorum.
So that we can have a much more fruitful discussion.
I go. Okay, we'll come back around for another round, and we want for people to stay if you can. We want to take a photo at the end of the discussion. There are a few things I wanted to touch on. I want you to write down the name Sarah Bartman, SarahBaartman. And this is a woman out of Southern Africa, South Africa, was now Eastern Cape, who was also captured just like Ota Benga. This wasn't only something that happened to men, but she was captured and displayed in freak shows in Europe as having buttocks just like women, African women have. So they would put her in freak shows and then displayed her all throughout Europe in the 1800s. So I want you to know some of these names because again, this is information that apparently we don't get in primary school or JHS or anything else. Just about a year ago here at University of Ghana, there was a white woman who was here on study abroad and at ISH, International Student Hostel. She got drunk and she started spitting on a black student who was also here on study abroad. She spat on him a few times, called him the N-word, and nothing happened to her. They called me in, they said they wanted me to be a part of it, but then they realized who I was. They said, we don't want you to be a part of it. They rescinded the invitation. But these are things that are happening right here at University of Ghana campus. So when we try to get some of us to show some level of pride and dignity, those same people have been taught throughout their lives not to have any pride or any dignity. And rather than standing up for black people, African people, we are here in a discussion talking about all the things that happened to Ota Benga, and these people have a small agent inside of them that says, well, don't do anything to the white people, please protect the white people for me. You understand? This is what I would refer to as inappropriate behavior. There's absolutely no discussion of what are we going to do to protect African people. Rather, we're talking about protect the ones who don't need protecting. There's an analogy that Nana Yao uses. He says, you're trying to remove the speck of dust from someone's eye, meanwhile you have a log sticking out of your own eye, right? On the airplane, this is an analogy I use, on the airplane they say, put the mask on yourself before you try to assist any others, especially children. Meanwhile, everyone else is breathing well, but we're still trying to put the mask on everyone else, right? When they say, I can't breathe, perhaps we can't breathe because we're trying to help everyone else breathe, and they're breathing just fine. We're the ones who have the issue. I also want you to put down the name Truganini, Truganini, Truganini. And if you haven't heard her name, she was the very last of the full-blooded Tasmanians. If you look at her, she looks more African. Tasmania is off of the coast of Australia. If you look at her, she looks more African than any African you will ever see. They are blacker than any Ghanaian you will ever see in your life. And she was the very last one because these people had been there for tens of thousands of years, but within 100 years of white people setting foot there, every single last one was exterminated off of the face of the planet. Genocide. And they used to play games, and I'll tell you about what those games constituted. They would take the babies of the indigenous jet black Tasmanians, and they would bury the babies up to their shoulders, so only the neck and the head is protruding. Then they would have contests of who could kick the head off of the baby the furthest. These are the ones who brought you civilization. They had contests of who could kick the head of the baby the furthest, and whoever won, then they won the competition. They would also decapitate the men and make the women wear the heads, the severed heads of their husbands as a necklace. Then they would drag them and rape them. And the reason why I said only the full-blooded ones were exterminated, because they allowed the ones who they raped, those children to come, so they are those who are mixed, right? But every single last full-blooded Tasmanian has been exterminated off of the face of the planet Earth. The very first Holocaust took place where? When we talk about the German Holocaust, Namibia. There was a man named von Trotha out of Germany who issued an extermination order against the Maharero people. So they had gone into the desert in order to seek refuge, and they decided to send the women, the children, and the elderly and sickly back from the desert to the edge of the desert. And von Trotha said, no, this is an extermination order. And they let loose the machine guns on the women, on the children, on the elderly, on the sick. Several books that are written about this, including, on the very first Holocaust. So when we hear Holocaust in Germany, we start thinking about these so-called Jews, but we don't think anything about these people in Namibia who are still trying to get reparations, but apparently they don't count as human beings by today's standards still. Also write down Herero genocide. I want you to look all of this up. El Negro was mentioned, I also wanted to mention that stuff. This idea of anti-racist racism, I want you to start thinking about the reason why these Eurasians brought so-called education. It's so that you would be an agent on their behalf, so that we would all get together as black people in one room. However, they are still here because you are on remote control self-destruct. So that any time that we are talking about what we need to do as black people, we have a few people who have had this little white agent embedded in them that talk about how can we make sure that we protect this white man. You understand? That is the reason why they brought the so-called education system, is so that those comments that were made would be made today. It's not to save your soul, it's not to make you think, it's not to do anything, but to make sure that you have a little white person implanted in you to make sure they are protected and will survive. I want you to think about that as well. There was a comment about if we do such and such, then we'll be the same as them. Oftentimes we hear these comments from people who have names like David, Harriet, Ethel, Hinkelbert, Humperdinck. You say, if we do this one thing, then we'll be exactly like them, but we have the names that are just like theirs. And then you look down at what you're wearing, and oftentimes it's a suit and tie, right? It's Obruniwewu. But we say, if we start to do something to protect ourselves, then we'll be just like them. Meanwhile, what language are we speaking? Even when we say we're going to speak in Chi, 75% of it comes out in English, and we don't even realize that we've switched to English. So if we're speaking English, wouldn't that also make us just like them? The religion that we have, what is the image of the so-called God you pray to? Is it the white man, right? Wouldn't that also make you just like them if they're praying to a white man and you're praying to a white man? Which is the image of Caesar Borgia, the illegitimate son of Pope Alexander VI, an image that only existed from the late 1400s. That's the image that you see on the back of every throw in every church. Wouldn't that also make you just like them? So if you're really interested in not being just like them, you may have to stop calling yourself David or Robert or Humperdinck or Engelbert. You have to stop doing that if you don't want to be like them. You have to stop praying to the white man. They're praying to a white man. If you want to not be like them, don't you need to stop praying to the white man? If you want to not be like them, don't you need to stop wearing their clothes and speaking their languages? You understand? So these are things that are contradictions, right? And if you are really serious about not being like them, don't pick and choose and cherry pick and say, well, only if we defend ourselves, then we'll be like them, right? It should be across the board. If you don't want to be like them, stop worshiping the imaginary white man in the sky. That's one. Also, missionaries were sent as spies. They were sent as spies as the very first wave, because what they would do is they would go back and report to Leopold of, these people have a beef. The Hutus and the Tutsis, they have a beef. How can we exploit this? The Fantes and the Asantes don't get along. Where did they get that information? They got it from the missionaries. You understand? Look, and the very first church is located where?
On the slave dungeon.
Inside the dungeon, because they have to make sure that they enslave you here at the same time that they're enslaving you here. Some people think that that's a contradiction. I say no, it's very consistent. You want to enslave every single part of them. And some of the comments here are testimony to that has actually worked very well. Amos Wilson, write down the name Amos Wilson, Amoswilson. Amos Wilson, he's a psychologist. He goes into spirit possession. He gives an analogy of multiple personality disorder, where you have the exact same body, but when one personality is in, they drink orange juice and they break out in hives. It's the exact same person, but a different personality comes, they drink orange juice and nothing happens. One smokes, and basically what he's talking about is depending on what personality has been, what consciousness has been implanted in you through education, through religion, so forth and so on, that determines what your behaviors are. And it can be to the point that the consciousness that's inside of you is even willing to sacrifice the host body to fulfill its tastes and desires. So once you've been taught to have a taste for white clothes, white religion, white food, so forth and so on, those things may bring you diabetes. They may bring you high blood pressure. However, this consciousness that this white inside with black skin outside, it wants to fulfill its tastes and desires, even if it leads to your destruction. You understand? Now what happens when you have someone with that type of anti-black, anti-African consciousness, and now they're put in the midst of other black people? What do they do to those other black people? The same things that we're talking about right here and we're lamenting about. So those are some things. And also I want us to stop blaming African people, because again, that's why that little white agent is implanted in you, so that at the end of the day we keep beating each other up. Meanwhile, the ones who have committed genocide, rape, killed over 10 million in the Congo and continue to kill them for coltan that your phones are made out of, right? That's the reason for the Rwanda genocide, so they can get the coltan out of Eastern Congo without having to pay taxes and tariffs, right? So if you see the Hutus fighting the Tutsis, they're doing that at the behest of someone who gets rich off of that. So I want to throw things out. We'll get back to the floor. We had Kirk on the Buffalo. We'll come back.
Oh, thank you very much. I think it's very interesting, the movie we just watched, and it has a huge implication on young Africans. That we need to realize that, you know, people like Leopold, when they first sent the first missionaries to Africa, on their first encounter with us, they realized that we were so highly evolved spiritually, that we were so connected to nature, that we had our own systems of government, we had our own forms of society, we even had sewage systems, which they didn't have. So there was a very direct strategy to break down our understanding and our appreciation, our closeness to God, which is nature. And so the losing of our names, the changing of our foods, the changing of our spiritual channels is all reflective of what this means. And like the movie is seeking to show, don't think that we live in a new age. We're living in another age where we are being branded, our youth are following the Manchester Uniteds and the Chelseas, and what is right before our eyes is oblivious. We have white people who've come to Africa again for a second time, this time for the most serious taking, to come and take away the seeds of the planet and to control them. And that will result in the ultimate cutoff between the Creator and the African people. Because the human body is the most advanced creation, and the fuel of the human body is a renewable, sustainable food. Anytime you tamper with the molecular structure of food, you tamper with even the way that it's going to be synthesized by the body.
So there's a new age of exactly what we're seeing here, a new barrage. We're seeing it with the religious bodies, with the Christianization of Ghana. Can you believe that a country that's supposed to be so religious is so dirty, so filthy, has such low moral values? Christianity has done nothing for us but to control us and put us in a mind frame. So it's very ironic for us to watch this, but I want all of us, because you're all university students, you guys are the future leaders. The policies and the kind of mind frame you will leave this university with is exactly what you will infect the world with if you come out with something good, or if you come out just following and continuing this tradition. So let's appreciate the reality on the ground. There is a war against the African people for hundreds of years. It has never ended. So don't ever think that these people are your friends and they're extremely strategic about everything they do. We only have this, again, sort of benevolence in us, and I think that comes from our closeness with God. We are godly people. Our way of life was Ubuntu. We care for our brother and sister, so we even invite you to eat in Ghana before we have a meal. And it is this closeness to God in us which I think continues to allow us to afford this niceness to people who've been so extremely savage. Before I get off the mic, I just want all of you to understand that the experience that some of your ancestors went through leaving these shores, maybe you got in a ship at Elmina, you were locked next to somebody, maybe 3 people down, somebody died, like last week. And because the people were even scared to come down to the dungeon, that person will probably be dead, rotting, or decaying, or vomiting, or sick, or defecating on themselves. Can you imagine a journey ride, 3, 4, 5 months long, tossing up and down on the bottom of a ship? You left Ghana, you were sweating, and when you get to North Carolina, you get to Georgia, it's freezing, it's snowing, and you get treated like a savage, and all along you watch most of the people die along the way. So please, never ever get distracted and confused about what your purpose is. You guys are the descendants of the greatest people that ever walked this planet. You introduced maths and science and art and music and medicine. We taught white people how to heal wounds. So when we watch these things today, let's embolden ourselves and know that we have so much work to do, but it starts with you people here on university campuses. There's so much ignorance out there. Most of our policymakers are ignorant. They follow this sort of philosophy, and that's why they can dare to tell us that GMO food will be good for us, and they can't see the vision of actually making Ghana an organic haven when the whole world is demanding organic food. So, not to talk much, but please, the life and the future of Ghana lies in every single one of your hands, and what you decide to do with this knowledge will determine how we go on in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ago.
Amen.
Can I use my voice?
Yeah.
Thank you. It's unfortunate I came in quite late, but I think I saw a few things. And here's what I want to comment on. I think I'm okay with the microphone. Personally, I think that what has happened in the past, I mean, when racism was at its peak, was that, and it somehow seemed normal, was that it sort of did 3 things to the black man. It just killed our confidence, it robbed us of our self-dignity, and actually also robbed us of our purpose. Now, fast forward, I think the black man is receiving more education. The black man is becoming more confident, somehow seems to have found his purpose. So to me, the greater cause goes beyond just a battle to just fight out racism. I think what we have right now to do is a purpose to achieve. And what that purpose to me is what the man here just said. We need to rediscover the things that we initially were the creators of. Make them what it ought to be in the present world. Because I think racism is only a side, should I say, just something just to side distract us, to summon the past and then bring it into the present again. So I believe our key mandate here and now, and in fact with what we have watched here today, is not to fight the battle, but to make sure we achieve the purpose. Because we've been robbed of it once, and we shouldn't be robbed of it again. Whatever you discover, whether you want to keep producing African goods, is because of the purpose. And I think if we are too busy concentrating on what another person does because we decide to live in their land, we are responsible for it solely. What we should be concerned right now and here and now is to be concerned about the purpose which we have lost once and shouldn't be willing to lose again. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is John Lincoln. I would like to say.
John Lincoln.
I would like to say. I would like to say this documentary was quite reflective of what is obtaining within Africa. I would just want to say a little bit that the genocide or the racism has taken a new twist in Africa, wherein it is now being transformed in the form of tribalism. I can give you an example. I'm from South Africa. When you're in South Africa, we were divided in a way that when I see someone who's Zulu, I see that person as my enemy, right? A person who comes from the northern province, let's say the Eastern Cape, the Xhosa people, when they see the Zulu people from KwaZulu-Natal, or someone who's coming from Limpopo province, where in Limpopo we've got the Pedi people, the Swati people, and we also have the Tsonga people. Each and every day, I'm talking about the present day, right? You go on social media, someone sends a certain message just to annoy a particular tribe. This other day I was driving from Polokwane, going to Johannesburg. There was a notice that was put just after Louis Trichard when you're approaching Polokwane. The notice was written, welcome to South Africa. It was a mockery for someone who was coming from Venda, because Venda initially it was not regarded as South Africa because it was a tribal state. So look at it now. Someone is in South Africa, but because it's from Venda, and Venda was conceived to be a place which is from a king. If you go to Venda, they've got a university called University of Venda. They've got a king there, right? Right now, as I speak, there's a king. But they are not perceived as South Africans. You go to the Tsonga people, they say they're not from South Africa, they're from Mozambique, right? And you would find that in Limpopo, the people who believe that we're South Africans are the Pedi people, right? In other tribes. So the whites were so clever in a way that they felt like racism is going to come in a new twist, in a new form, right? So they came up with these independent tribal states, knowing for sure that there is always going to be acrimony, there's always going to be fights amongst different tribes. So, Steve, to summarize what I was saying, I would like to quote a statement by Steve Biko. Steve Biko said, the greatest weapon of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So what is important as an African is decolonization of the mindset. Don't look at a white person as someone who's superior to you. Because the moment you have this preconceived idea about a white person as someone who's a supernatural being, who's different from you, at the end of the day, you always remain in the same pandemonium that you face yourself. So the only way to fight racism is having this mindset, a new twist of mindset, to say, I will never take things the manner in which they were. I have to think differently. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a quick point to make. Maybe if I don't make it, it might. It relates to the decolonial process, okay? How we have to self-decolonize from changing our names. But what I want to concentrate on is the language we speak and some of the terms we use or labels we use to describe Africans and African things that we feel are neutral, are harmless, and they just ought to be used. One of such words is the word tribe. All right? Many of us don't know it because from the very beginning, we go to school, they teach us that our states are made up of tribes, Asante, and so on and so forth. Now, before the Europeans drew those arbitrary lines, which turned us into what we call ourselves today, there were kingdoms. Okay? And the least description you could give, there were nations, there were multi-state, and so on and so forth. The least description you give is at least ethnicity. Tribe is a derogatory term that is used to describe certain people of the world. Africans, indigenous Americans, Asians. You never hear tribe being used to describe white people or Europeans.
But it's an English word.
Because it's an English word. Okay? So please, let's take note of this. There are many, now we call our own languages vernacular. Right? We call our own languages vernacular. And there's our languages. That's something that you should also consider. There are many of these vocabulary that manage to pass into our so-called independent states. And the decolonization process that was truncated ended there, and we still use them. But Iceland, right? That country is made up of 300,000 people. Are you aware? They are a nation, right? How many millions make Yoruba? How many millions make Asante?
25 to 30.
How many millions make Zulu? Yet we classify them as tribes, and we classify a 300,000 group of people as a nation. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening. Ngomba. I'll say my name is Prophet Ngomba. 50 years to come, Jesus will not come. Consistently, 5,000 years from now, he will not come. I don't know if anybody can challenge me or whatever, but we can talk about that later on. They showing love to the enemy, I don't have any problem with that. But why would you persistently show love to somebody who is always like wanting to destroy you at any point in time? The least chance he will get, he will destroy you. You want to show him love? You want to show him love?
Blame Gandhi.
Let's say you have a cutlass, and they're like, you cut off my arm, like my right arm, and they're like, I've forgiven you. Then you came along again, they removed the left. I said like, oh, I've forgiven you. I have a whole lot of love. The next thing, I'm sure when you come, you take off my neck. Is that love? The white man has always, let me leave. I don't know, we'll talk about this later.
Please, let me also say something briefly. I think I'm sad and disappointed. There is a book by Carter G. Woodson, The Miseducation of the Negro. Please put it down. You see, when you're the miseducation of the Negro. Carter G. Woodson. Carter C-A-R-T-E-R. The moment you start Googling Carter G. Woodson, you see, we have been miseducated, we have received anti-education, we have been uneducated. And so for almost 30 years of our lives, we've learned the histories and philosophies of people. And psychologically, we've been made to think like them. We've been relegated to the back door. And so GOC will tell you that if you go to the back door and there is no door, as a black man, you will create one for yourself. And that is what we are seeing now. We are embracing Western philosophies and the ideas as if it is the order of the day. And anybody who criticizes them is seen as evil. Now, Malcolm X said that the first rule of survival is self-preservation. Any people who must survive must first of all preserve their identity. It is very, very important. When other people do it, they call it nationalism. When we do it, they call it racism. Okay, it is so sad that you are trying to remove our situation from 500 years of slavery and almost 10 decades of colonial rule. And you say that we should forget about all that and then move forward. How can you move forward? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you are not able to move forward. But You will never move forward when you don't know what has been done to you in the past. And so you need to be aware of what has been done to you in the past, who did that to you, so that you don't embrace them again. And that is what Christianity is doing to us. You see, if you are here and you think the missionary brought us education, you have not been educated proper. Okay, if you are here and you think the missionaries brought us education, go and read the history of education in Africa. The missionary school they established was not to provide us with education. It was to provide education for the white people who came here, the mulattoes that were how to call it, birth were the African people. Okay, and later they were going to transform them into what you have, the formal education. Now please again, go and read Claude Ake. Claude Ake has a work, The Political Economy of Africa. And he will tell you that, just the way the man said, Steve Biko, the most dominant weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And there are two means by which you can get the people to do what you want them to do for you. It is not so much by coercion, but by education. So the education that was brought to Africa, please, it was not to make us good people. It was not to civilize us. John Henry Clark will tell you that, look, the meaning of civilization is different from what was brought to Africa. You can't murder. Please, once again, look at this book, Imperial Reckoning, the untold story of British Gulag in Kenya. This was a Harvard historian who unearthed the genocide and the brutalities of the British against what you call the Mau, the people are called the land and freedom fighters. Please, again, look at what you call the Yakazid period. The first time, apart from the genocide committed by Germany, look at the atrocities that were undertaken by Benito Mussolini in Ethiopia. The first time they used mustard gas, and you are telling me that I should embrace these people? Please, if you are here and you are thinking that we should be subservient and lenient to white people and not be racist, then please, you are going back to the very same trap that took you almost 100 years ago. We need to be aware of our history. And so we cannot forget what has been done to us in the past. Thank you very much.
Just to quickly mention, you mentioned Mussolini bombing Ethiopia. You see Bob Marley's song, Until the Philosophy That Makes One Race Superior. That's what Haile Selassie read at the UN General Assembly, and he was ignored. The fascists in Mussolini bombed the hell out of Ethiopia for years. But then I was happy each time with Kadaji Wilson, because Doug was saying that when we black people are gathered, you find elements, the white man living in the brain. Kadaji Wilson said, paraphrasing it, that when you get a white man living in the mind of the Negro, he will self-destruct. You don't need the white man there to oppress him and what have you. Now, with their own Bible, because I see my Roman, like 1 Peter 2:18, slaves, in reverent fear of God, submit yourself to your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. I'm not really too surprised about that, so I'll leave them. They're pretending to be awake, but with time. Let me talk about my South African brother. Like last month, Bell Pottinger, it's an HR firm. Now in South Africa, you hear about Zuma's corrupt cases, and his linkage to the Gupta brothers. Now it's so clear, this Bell Pottinger, an HR firm, was contacted by the Gupta brothers to intentionally heighten racial tension. So you hear of xenophobic attacks. No, the Zulus are not against anything. We might have some historic issues, but we always settle it. You hear the Elwes and Ashantis and all this, but we're the same ones that to cater to them. The Elwes and some Togolese and all this. Our colleague gave us our stool back to the Anglo land. So you need to understand this. It's all an European construct. You see, an HR firm heightened xenophobic attacks in SA because we were being paid over £100,000 a month by the Gupta brothers to divert attention of South Africans, you and I, our attention from the corrupt cases, and to imaginally just think that there's some xenophobic attacks, like we hate each other. You see, it's an European construct. So we need to look at that clearly, you see. Just 2 weeks ago, our brother showed a movie about how to unify the North, that they're all from one grandfather, and then we see the Nairigu saying that this politics is eating so much into our chieftaincy, and it's unable to unite. It's politics. I'm ready to do that about politics. You can see the role it plays in our Shidibab. In 2000, the Volta Agno chief died. MPP was so ready to put somebody there. It's some issue that nobody talks about. I doubt a lot of us know about it. You see, the political influence is there, so it's not about us. They make you think we hate ourselves. We don't hate ourselves. They put things in place for you to think that, oh, this tribe is against this tribe and all that bullshit. Like the white man living, sorry with the bad language, like the white man living in our brains, we need to get him out.
Also, the ISIS Papers by Chris Wilson. The ISIS Papers. Please look it up. ISIS Papers by Chris Wilson.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Devon, and I just want to speak on self-preservation a little bit. We talk a lot about how white people are doing this and white people are doing that, and honestly, like, what are we doing, like, for ourselves? Honestly, what are we building for ourselves? If we literally just ignored what they were doing and did what we wanted to do, honestly, we could do it. Because we built whole countries for free. We built whole nations off of slavery. So why are we still waiting and acting like we need some kind of go-ahead to do what we've been doing for everybody else but ourselves? Like, we need to build this planet back to where it needs to be, because the whole world is ours as black people. It's our planet, and we the children. And it's gonna die if we don't save it. So if you wanna be here, take a part and clean it up.
Sure.
Thank you.
I just came in, so excuse me, but on the tail end of what he was saying, I wanted to say, you were saying about them, something like they're savages or something like that. In 1452, I think it was, Pope Nicholas sanctioned European nations. It was called the Doctrine of Discovery, that any Christian nation, any nation throughout the world that was not Christian, they had, Europeans had the right to go and subdue it and do whatever they wanted, so to speak. And right now, this is what is, the effects of that is all the way up to today. When you look at the globe, you see FR, French in the South Pacific, PORT. Look at any globe and you'll see all over the world they went and impressed their way upon people. So I see it necessary for us to shed their way. Start bring about a revival of an appreciation of African culture. And start first by let go of their names. And because Kwaku is beautiful. I'm Kwaku, Kojo, Ama, Afua, Apusua, Amu. Them are beautiful names. And I really love the Ghana names. I want you to know that. The other thing I wanted to say, and I'll make this quick, so Dr. Kelvin won't say that. But my God, one more important point. In relation to, and the brother Divine was right. I like what he said about we should not. This is not my point, but we should not live and base our life on what they are doing. We shouldn't have a culture of reacting to what white people do. I was telling a relative of mine that now, since the 60s, I saw protests. I was a teenager, protests and everything, and they call it the turbulent 60s. I seen all of that. And I told a relative of mine, I'm tired of, I don't think about, well, he's racist. Like today you hear all the protests in USA and other places now, he's racist and they are racist. Man, damn that. Africa is the origin of everything. Culture, civilization, everything came out of here. And let us start, we need a revival, a renaissance, a reawakening, a reappreciation of your own culture. And the last thing I want to say, when I see some of y'all walking, see with the white, you see white people, and I don't hate the creation. I just hate, I don't like white supremacy. But I watch you see white people come walking, oh, how are you today? And all nice. They reap the benefit from the wealth that their parents or their parents' parents or their parents' parents got from exploiting African colonies and other colonies throughout the world. So they are beneficiaries. Do not look up to them for that. If you know my family, if I was interested in marrying someone from your family, and I come from a bad family, how African tradition is, you will know about my family, you wouldn't want to deal with me. Well, what about them? They're children of murderers, liars, and thieves, and manipulators, and everything else. So they're beneficiaries. You know, I'm not saying don't respect people, but you know, think about who you're looking up to. They do not have no, you know, sometimes you might make a mistake and see them as privilege. I asked some of the students that, no! The black man and woman is the original man and woman. Thank you.
We're going to start to wrap it up very shortly. So here and here, and then we'll.
Thank you very much.
Please, Doc, when you were talking, you did say that during the colonial times, it was the whites who implanted something into the minds, or have implanted something into the minds of blacks, such that we have that implant in us and we do everything in that way. I want to know, before, when you read history, realize that before even the whites came, realize that the Africans, or in Ghana here for instance, the Ashantis for instance, were not one, or even in Ghana here, we were not one. We had instances where the Ashantis move out, go and fight other people to take hold of their land, all because they wanted to build a very great empire. So I want to know how did that one come about? Thank you very much.
Thank you once again. I like what some people are saying with the religion. The gentleman there, the Lord made mention of not bowing to the white man, the imaginary white man in the sky. Yeah, I like that. I like that very much. And the other people, the other guy who said Jesus is not coming in 50 years time. Even in 500 years time, he's not coming. He's not coming anywhere. He's somewhere. So I think this is another way we have now. Like there's slavery still going on. There's slavery still going on. The church is an example of slavery still going on. Life in Canada, because they are talking about something that they don't even know. Even the pastor telling you that he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know. Don't lie to yourself. He doesn't know anything. And now he's telling you to come and give him some money for what? As tithe. Oh, and you find people packing money from their banks and what and giving it to pastors. What at all is going on? If you are able to abolish Christianity or stop the lies in Christianity, I think half of the work is done. Yes, I think half of the work is done. Because there are so much lies going on there. The pastors are saying a whole lot of things, and because they know people are gullible, so they say then you get the foolish people running after them. Yeah, they say then you get the foolish people running after them and packing money for their banks and selling their properties. And look, I beg, we all go to school to come out to gain some knowledge. But people are still going to school and they graduate and they are still stupid. Kanye West said that people graduate but be still stupid. And it's bad. So I beg, let's finish school and come out with a lot of sense to change the world. That's all.
That is what Institute of African Studies is trying to do. You are trying to mentally decolonize your mind.
I want to respond to some things and summarize some things, and we'll come to a close. Again, we thank everyone who is staying all the way to the end. We do want to take the group photo, and we appreciate you being here with us in African Studies. One thing that was mentioned in the documentary was unilineal evolution. There was this idea of a divine chain of being. You can write that down your notes, divine chain of being. And this is even before Darwinism. And it was a religious justification for a hierarchy in which you had at the very top God, then you had, which was white, depicted as white, then white angels, then white men, then white women, and then everyone else with black people down at the very bottom. Then underneath that, you had birds, you had animals, you had trees and plants, then you had rocks and stones. And this was what they transformed into what was called social Darwinism. Unilineal evolution was mentioned, the idea that everyone follows one line of evolution. And that idea still stays with us today in what is now called development. Development, right? We talk about developing Africa. And very few times do we ask, develop from what into what? Develop from what into what? Civilization or barbarism? What are we trying to become? And oftentimes it takes the form of not being African and trying to Eurasianize yourself through your language, through the hair on your head. You want to make it like the fur of a dog or a horse or a pig. You want to look like a shaved dog and put the bleaching cream, all of these things, and we see that as development, right? So we've still taken this same idea from chain of being to social Darwinism, and now they've given it a different name, but it's the exact same thing. And they enrich themselves on the basis of that, because once you need to develop to become a white person, who gets rich off of that? Don't you need to buy clothes from them so you can be a very good white person? Right? Don't you need to go to the ugly parlor so that you can get rid of your full human hair and get fur like a horse or a dog or a cat? Isn't that what you need? Don't you need to go and give them money so that you can do that and develop? Right? So from the Obruni Wawuat idea to everything else, to the bleaching cream, that's the exact same idea. They change the name of something, but they keep all the things the same. So now we're trying to develop under Millennium Development Goals or Sustainable Development Goals, but it's the same idea. Stop being African, because that one is not going to enrich them. And sometimes I'll talk to my students, are we in a better position now than we were in the 1300s? They say, oh, of course, we have phones now, we have this, we have that. And I say, if the goal is self-sufficiency, at that point in time, if you wanted to make a house, you could do everything to make your own house. If you wanted to clothe your food, clothes, and shelter, if you wanted to clothe yourself, you could take everything from cotton, you could weave it, and you can have everything you need to wear. If you talk about food, you could plant all of your indigenous cassava. Sorry, let me not say cassava, because that one is not indigenous to Africa. I hope people are aware that cassava is not indigenous to Africa. Plantain is not indigenous to Africa. That's why it has names like Wadie, Bro, Wadie is yam. So you're saying a foreign version of a yam. Abrobe is not indigenous to here. You have to go to the north before you can even find out what you were eating before these Eurasians came, because corn is not, maize is not indigenous. So think about dokono, think about apre, think about fufu. Both the cassava and the plantain are not indigenous. You have to go to the north and get the pounded yam, because that one is indigenous. So these are some of the things to think about. Also, we mentioned decolonizing. I was just at this conference and I wanted to wear this to make sure I mentioned it, power. And at the conference, I think there were some good things, but everyone there was talking about decolonizing. And it reminded me of the aid industry. Because the role of the aid industry, they talk about alleviating poverty, not getting rid of it. Because if they got rid of it, they wouldn't be able to have conferences at 5-star hotels anymore. If they actually resolved the problem, then millions would be out of jobs, because poverty is an industry. So sometimes we get so caught up in talking about decolonization, when it comes down to actually doing something we don't want to do, we just want to tell everyone, you need to decolonize. Then you tell me I need to decolonize. Then we go home. As we have our wives with their perms and we're eating fufu with knife and fork, we say, yes, we need to decolonize. You understand? So these are some of the things, some of the contradictions to think of. And I brought that up because sometimes we talk about decolonizing, but our names are Lincoln. Our names are John, Humperdinck, Engelbert. We need to not say anything about decolonizing until we can show these steps that we have taken. Any knowledge you have, there should be a behavioral correlate. It means there should be a behavior linked to anything you learn. As soon as I learn it, I stop doing this. As soon as I learn this, otherwise you didn't learn anything. If you read 1,000 books, and this person has read no books, and you're both doing the exact same thing, what's the point? The behavior is the exact same, right? So something to think about. Also, there was a mention of a leader after Martin Luther King earlier. And I want to read a document declassified from the COINTELPRO papers. And the idea is that every single one of us is a potential black messiah. And that's what came out. They said the goals of COINTELPRO papers, of the COINTELPRO program, was to prevent the coalition of militant black nationalist groups, to prevent the rise of a black messiah who could unify and electrify the militant black nationalist movement, prevent black nationalist groups and leaders from gaining respectability by discrediting them to the community. Our final goal should be to prevent the long-range growth of militant black nationalists, especially among youth. So when you see racial profiling and they're trying to get everyone's fingerprints, they're trying to get retina scans, they're trying to get everyone documented, even when they come to Ghana with biometric passports, they know that every single one of us in this room and in this country and on this continent is a potential black messiah. So they have to keep tabs on you. This is from US government documents. So the idea isn't to have everyone follow Martin Luther King. The idea is to be that person, all of us, and that's what they understand. Briefly talked about eugenics. I think we discussed that. When we talk about Africans uniting, this also comes to the idea of the hijacked term Pan-Africanism. So when we talk about Pan-Africanism, we're talking about the indigenous people of Africa, not the invaders of Africa, right? The invaders such as the Dutch Boers, such as the Arabs in North Africa, all of those are invaders to Africa. If you look at one term for Africa, Kemet, it means land of black people. If you look at another term for Africa, Abibimain, it means land of black people. If you look at Bambara, word for Africa, Farafina, land of black people. If you look at Yoruba, word for Africa, Iliadulawa, land of black people. If you look at the Wolof word for Africa, Reo Nikunyul, land of black people. If you look at the Kikongo word for Africa, and Siabandombe, land of black people, and I could go on and on. So if you have people who are in this land of black people and they're not black, they are very recent invaders to the land of black people. So when we talk about African people uniting, we have to ask unification between whom and whom. So Haiti tried to join the African Union and they were rejected. Morocco tried to join the African Union and they were welcomed with open arms. This is because the term Pan-Africanism has been intentionally hijacked from the indigenous black people, no matter where we are in the world, to include anyone who happens to be on the continent. So then the Dutch Boer who murdered your grandfather, oh, well, he happens to be on the African continent. That's what we call continentalism, not Pan-Africanism. So we should be very careful when we say unification between whom and whom, because otherwise you'll unify with the snake and the snake will bite you. He mentioned suicide seeds, very good point, because the very first sacrifice is, instead of taking the seed, to plant it, so that your descendants, who are also your ancestors, will be able to take that seed. The very first libation is to pour water on that seed, so that the generations who regenerate will come back and partake of what grows, right? So to cut us off from that regeneration process, the purpose of all those things is to promote life. So all that's to do that. Also, Amos Wilson, who I mentioned before, he talks about the battered wife syndrome. Battered wife syndrome. This is where the woman is beaten by a very violent man, and instead of saying, I need to do something about this man, she says, maybe I just didn't cook the food well enough. She says, maybe I didn't sweep the floor well enough, so she's blaming herself. This is seen as a psychological disorder, but this is what all of us are intentionally suffering from because of miseducation, diseducation, and anti-education. So rather than taking action against the violent beater, we take action against ourselves, right? This is called self-hatred. You think it's love for someone else. No, it's hatred for yourself, and it's not a good thing. History of education in Africa. The very first universities in the history of the world were here in Africa. They were called Per Ankh. And it was under the Romans that the very last one of those was shut down. So we invented the world's first writing system, but the Romans made sure they shut down the very last one. The temple at Philae, I was able to go there, and you can see some of these last temples that were finally shut down. So when we think about education in Africa, I don't want us to think about the neo-colonial period or the colonial period. You should start your count 5,000 years ago plus when you're talking about education in Africa, right? And then you can start thinking about Timbuktu. You can think about all these places that had the history of education disrupted. You understand? So they did not bring education to you. We had education, and they made sure to replace it with miseducation, diseducation, and anti-education. Also, it was mentioned what was going on in the United States that's still going on. Someone mentioned when racism was in its heyday. I don't know when that heyday ended. If someone could give me the date. It was also mentioned Asante Empire. This is not an old empire. This is 1700. And the Portuguese got here 1471. So what you're seeing is a nation that's already in the throes of the prisoner of war period, where the Eurasians are pitting one group against another group. They're selling Dane guns to one group, they're selling Dutch guns to the other group. And they say, we'll give it to you on credit. The only way you can pay for it is to go enslave those people over there. Then they do the same thing with those people, say the only way you can pay for it is to go enslave them. And then they laugh all the way to the bank, right? So if you want to know what was going on, you definitely cannot start with Asante, because Asante is a product of these Eurasians pitting one African against the other. Sometimes we talk about Liberia and say, oh, the Africans from America versus the indigenous, they were fighting amongst each other, and that's a problem. But then we don't talk about Rwanda. We don't talk about modern times in South Africa, that anytime black people are fighting amongst each other, you have to think about who benefits from that ultimately. So in Liberia, the ones who benefited were the Beers and the diamond cartels, because in order to pay for the guns that they were given for free, there were no AK-47 factories or tank factories or bazooka factories in the hinterlands of Liberia. So you have to ask, you have to follow the money trail of who provided those in order to get what. Because once I give you a bazooka, now you pay me in multiple kilos of diamonds, blood diamonds. I think you've heard that term before. In Rwanda, the Hutus and the Tutsis, now that gives you all of what you use for your laptops and your cell phones, the coltan that was mentioned earlier. So when you have black people fighting amongst black people, you have to think about who laughs all the way to the bank and who benefits from that. Back at the Asante times, the answer was the same as it is right now, right? So anytime we fight amongst each other. And I want to close out that by saying that racism is not the problem. I hope everyone is listening to me. Racism is not the problem. Also, capitalism is not the problem. Also, neoliberalism is not the problem. All of these isms are distractions and diversions to keep you from focusing on the problem. And I'll give you a quote from Bobby Wright's essay, The Psychopathic Racial Personality. Is everyone listening? Yeah. Is everyone listening? Yeah. He says the following, and it's an analogy, so please try to follow. In a bullfight, after being brutalized while making innumerable charges at the movement of a cape. So there's a matador who waves a cape and the bull chases after the cape. There comes a time when the bull finally turns and faces his adversary, with the only movement being his heaving, bloody sides. It is believed that for the first time, he really sees the matador. This final confrontation is known as the moment of truth. For the bull, this moment comes too late. The experience of black people all over the world represents an analogous situation. For hundreds of years, blacks have been charging at the banners that are held by the European white matadors. Those banners have been represented by concepts such as democracy, capitalism, Marxism, religion, and education. The banners remain constant as long as blacks were assets. However, with technology and worldwide industrialization on the rampage, resulting in a further exploitation of Africa's resources, which in turn produces an increase in Africans' blacks' national consciousness, blacks are now a threat and a liability to the white race. Therefore, the banner held by the matador represents only one concept: genocide. As a consequence, the major research that white scientists are involved in today is genocidal in nature: nuclear warfare, population control, medication control, genetic engineering, psychosurgery, electrical stimulation of the brain, and the highly complex science of behavioral technology. Indeed, it is blacks' moment of truth. It is time for blacks to look at the matador. So what am I saying? I'm saying that here is a matador who holds a cape, and we chase after racism. We say if we can get rid of racism, then we'll really have done something. We chase after that, they stab us. Because the problem isn't the cape. The problem is the one holding the cape. We say the problem is capitalism. We say if we can get rid of that one, we chase after that cape and they stab us. And you say, oh, the problem is neoliberalism. We chase after that one. The problem is Marxism, it's Christianity, it's Islam, it's all of these things. No. The problem is the one who creates all of these things in order to ensure their own survival, in order to survive in order to ensure their own self-preservation and self-perpetuation. So what I'm saying, it's time to look at the matador, it's time to look at the white person. The analogy is, if we keep tearing down spider webs, but we leave the white spider there, every morning we will come and we'll see a new spider web in the corner. So until you are ready, willing, and able to deal with this white Eurasian spider, whether that Eurasian happens to call itself Arab, or French, or Chinese, or Indo-Aryan, or Korean, or what have you, until you are ready to do what's necessary for the survival of your black self and your black children, then you will be calling what you're doing love, but really it will be self-hatred, because you will be murdering the generations yet to come, and you'll be colluding with your Eurasian enemy. So let's look at the matador. So I want to thank all of you on behalf of the director of the Institute of African Studies and myself, a research fellow here in African Studies. I hope this was in blackening. I hope you found it to be blacktastic, blacknificent, blackerific, blackterful, spectacular, and a new one in my arsenal, black standing, and black extravagant. So with no further ado, I think we'll get everyone up for our final photo.
What about next Thursday? What's coming?
Next Thursday, we're showing a documentary on Cheikh Anta Diop. Cheikh Anta Diop, the nuclear physicist, Egyptologist, historian. If you find any discipline that he was not an expert in, politician, Pan-Africanist, you will be amazed to find anything that he was not an expert in. And it goes into his life. So please come here Thursday at 5 p.m. And everyone please come up for our final photograph for the historic record. Thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause for coming and staying. And give me a round of applause too for making it all happen. There we go.